Webinars, they are like Scotty Smalls in The Sandlot. They're not cool at all, but you do need them if you want to play ball. And if you're ever in a pinch, they can just show up out of nowhere and help you get a ton of leads on the quick. There's just one problem with webinars, and you might have noticed it. Boring! They're the biggest snooze fest going. My wife took me to see the Nutcracker last Christmas, and I fell asleep before I saw any nutcrackers. And I had a better time there than I've had at most webinars.
So, Dad, why do you do these videos?
Hey guys, it's Matt Gambino helping you level up your skills in sales and marketing. This is the place to learn how to acquire more customers and keep your careers moving in the right direction in sales and marketing. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing, and also feel free to check out the show notes and links to other resources below. It doesn't matter how many people show up to your webinar, in my view. If those people aren't engaged and they're not participating, I think that they're going to walk away with a pretty plain vanilla impression of your product. So stick around, because in this video, I'm going to reveal 6 tips for interacting with your audience, keeping them engaged to maximize the chance of them eventually turning into real customers. Let's get to it. All right, tip number 1 is to show genuine appreciation. People are much more than sales leads. I know that's not news to you. You would never define yourself as a sales lead, I'm sure. And as a person, as a real person, you yearn to be appreciated for the things that you do. Even things like turning up for a presentation. Even Mother Teresa appreciated being appreciated. I've heard that about her. It doesn't cost anything to send people a note and tell them how much you appreciate their time and how grateful you are that they're going to be spending time with you in about an hour. I do that before all of my webinars. About an hour, I send a heartfelt message telling them just that, and I ask an open question in the message. It's usually something really general, like, what's the one thing that you hope to get out of your time with me today? What's the one thing you hope to get out of your time with me? That's refreshing. I'm always blown away when people respond to that message, because it tells me that they're really serious about the topic that we're going to go over. And I don't want to disappoint those people. And you won't want to either. And a power tip on this one: when you send that note, ask them to respond to you on your social media channel of choice, like a direct message on LinkedIn or something. It has a more personal feel, in my view, and it's a no-brainer for helping to build out your network. So tip 2 is to deliver what I call an immediate Disney experience. And if you've ever been to Disney or Universal Studios, you know that the lines are long, but you also know that the attractions actually start in the lines themselves, with the animation and the music and all the rest of it. A huge mistake most of us make in our webinars is not considering how we want the audience to really feel the second they get onto the platform. We put all of our work into the presentation itself, and that's really important, but our audience is going to be more likely to write the whole thing off as just another webinar if we don't set a tone for them the second that they join. So one thing I always do to make sure I set that tone is to actually design my introductory slide first. It's the slide that people see before the webinar actually begins. I call it my splash screen. I think about how I want my audience to feel when they get in, and I design a splash screen to help convey that feeling. Then I design all of my other slides to act in harmony with that splash screen, and that sort of is designed to extend the feeling throughout the whole ride, so to speak. Tip 3 is to create what I call interactive bursts. These are just little asks that I make for one word or short phrase responses in the chat room throughout the course of the webinar. I run on the theory that people are going to be more likely to participate in the chat room if I make it obvious that they don't have to really work to do it. I want to make it easy as possible. And that's why interactive bursts are so useful, because they're so easy. So one burst could sound something like, hey, we got a ton of people coming in at the last minute. If you're just getting in right now, go ahead and type hello in the chat room and tell us what city you're from. Another burst could sound something like, okay, before we get going, let's check the audio visual. What color shirt am I wearing? And then another burst could be something along the lines of, wow, I feel like I just threw a ton of intel at you guys in a really short time. So if that concept makes sense to you, or if you've experienced it before, just go ahead and type in yes or go in the chat room. Yes, all right, I'm seeing a lot of yeses and a lot of goes, so let's move on. So getting people to make these little bursts, to me, is like getting them into the shallow end of the swimming pool. They're going to get in, they're going to see that it's safe, and that's going to make them more inclined to eventually wade into the deeper end and make comments or ask questions that are more impromptu. Tip number 4 is so vital, I can't even stand it, you guys. Make sure you're asking your audience what I call challenge questions. A challenge question gets them to talk about a particular challenge that they face that you know your product or service is eventually going to solve for. For example, let's say you're hosting a webinar on a brand new product that manages workflow at a healthcare center or a hospital or something like that. A great challenge question could be something along the lines of, okay, in just a few words, folks, in the chat room, go ahead and type the biggest challenge you face when it comes to allocating medicine on the hospital floor. Wait a few seconds. Be okay with the silence. After a few seconds, you'll start to get some short phrases on the chat room. You'll start to see things like, can't read doctor's handwritten notes, or no time to keep up with the volume, exclamation point. So just make sure that you're acknowledging those short phrases as they come in. So I'll say something like, can't read handwritten notes. All right, that's a good one, Bill. Thanks a lot for that one. Or, can't keep up with the volume. Mary, we see that all the time. Thanks very much for your comment. Quick power tip here. If no one immediately responds to my challenge question, I usually say something like, wow, so everything is absolutely perfect out there. And that usually tends to get them going. Just the right bit of snark. And these challenge questions lead me directly to tip number 5, the backlink. So I just discovered the internets recently, and they're really cool. And one thing about the internets are these things called backlinks. And a backlink is a link to your web page from someone else's web page. They really help with search engine optimization. All right, so let's apply this backlink concept to the webinar. Bill answers one of my challenge questions at the beginning of the webinar, and he responds with something like, can't read handwritten notes. Okay, fast forward to the midway point of the webinar. I'm covering a particular capability in my software that deals with allocating meds. When I get to the function that has a report that shows the name of the medication and the dosage right on screen, I'm going to say something like, okay, so Bill, a little while ago, you mentioned the challenge around reading handwritten notes. Our users really appreciate this capability because it just takes that problem away. So I wanted to thank you again for raising the issue. It's really important. Do I get a thumbs up emoji from Bill? Oh, I think so. I think I do. And lastly, tip number 6 is a technique that I call the one thing. So as I'm wrapping things up, I usually ask the audience something like, hey, what's the one thing that you took away from this webinar that you found to be most helpful or most informative? Or if it was a training webinar, I might ask something like, hey, what's the one thing that you learned today that you feel you're going to be able to incorporate right away into your work? And I'll get a lot of good responses back. A nice side benefit is I can see what responses are trending, what topics really are the most popular, because that's going to help me craft future webinars. Wow. 6 super powerful, super easy tips for firing up your virtual audience and making your webinar a real experience and not just another slideshow. Now look, you're never going to prevent your virtual audience from checking their email or answering their phone, but you can get them thinking, this guy's crazy. He keeps asking questions. I got to pay attention. So, quick question for you. What's a technique that you've used to keep your virtual audiences engaged and participating in your webinars? Let me know in the comments below. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please do me a solid and hit that like button, hit that share button so we can spread the goodness around. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next episode.